Surfing, Mexico, and murder. When Australian surfer and lacrosse player Callum Robinson took a new friend's advice to travel to a secluded beach south of the Mexican border, he had no idea that this decision would cost him, his brother, and their friend their lives. It all began with an innocent suggestion. Travel 100 miles south of the border, and you will find a pristine beach only known by locals. I mean, sure, you would have to travel through dangerous territory to get there, but what could possibly go wrong at a beach? Unfortunately, when their worst fears were eventually realized, the situation escalated far beyond their expectations. But what precisely happened next? And who was behind their demise? Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, folks, and welcome back to Coffeehouse Crime. My name is Adrian, and today I have another terrifying story for you. In this video, I'm taking you south of the American-Mexican border to look at a case that has recently concluded. And although the trial is still yet to go ahead, this story is rather cut and dry. By the way, Coffeehouse Crime is all about true crime, strange and chilling stories, and the best way to support me is by subscribing to this channel. So, please do me a favour and hit that button. I also respond to most comments in the first hour of all videos going live, so if you want to catch me, please hit the bell notification too. Oh, and also, I have a small update on my own personal life and this channel at the end of this video, so please stick around to see that too. And now, with all of that out the way, please grab yourself a coffee and let's caffeinate while we investigate. This is the case of the Baja surfer murders. Here's someone new to the channel. Welcome to Baja, California, folks. As one of Mexico's most northern states, it's a Mexican extension to California's long stretch of coastline. And dare I say it, it has better beaches too. Sandwiched between the northern Pacific Ocean to the west and the Gulf of California to the east, it is no surprise how important water is to its economy. Baja has one of Mexico's most prominent fishing industries, one of the country's busiest ports, and is a massive center for tourism too. Most notably because of the large number of short-term visitors from California. Towns and cities near the US border include Tijuana, which is famous for its nightlife and shopping destinations. And you can also find Rosarito nearby, with its wide, sandy Pacific beaches. With a population of 3.8 million residents, Baja is home to many proud Mexicans. These people are used to seeing plenty of Americans and other tourists visit their beautiful beaches. And it's clear to see why too. I mean, just look at these views. But that is not to say that Baja is all sunshine and rainbows, as unfortunately, a lot of northern Mexican states have a severe problem with drugs and crime. In fact, just looking at the British government website absolutely proves my point. The FCDO advises against all but essential travel to the city of Tijuana in Baja California, Chihuahua, Sinaloa, Tamaulipas, and Zacatecas. Many of these fatalities are suspected gang members who are killed in violent clashes between the various different organizations that compete for control of trafficking routes into the USA. And unfortunately, armed clashes between security forces and drug groups can happen at any time without warning. Away from the drug scene, many tourists find themselves in trouble when being robbed for money or worse. And sadly, this story is a perfect example of the nightmare that many tourists fear. It was this year, on April the 27th, 2024, that three men suddenly vanished just south of the American-Mexican border. Two of them, being brothers from the Australian city of Perth, were on a camping and surfing trip in northern Mexico, with one of their friends joining them for the experience. It was on this day that two Australian brothers named Jake and Callum Robinson and their American friend named Jack Carter Rhoad all failed to show up at their planned Airbnb in Rosarito. All three of these men were, quite honestly, extraordinary people, and the void left behind in their silence was all too much for everyone who knew them. What's more, it was very unusual for all of them to suddenly disappear as well. The three of them had been documenting their own holiday along the Mexican coastline on Instagram, but now, they all just seemed to suddenly vanish. And sadly, this concern would never get better, and over the next few days, several clues left behind would paint a very terrifying picture. In the coming week, it would outrage the nations of Mexico, America, and Australia. Now, you can probably guess that this story will sadly end in murder. But first, before we carry on with what exactly happened to these gentlemen, let's first understand who they were in the first place. Beginning with our two Australians, Callum Robinson was a giant man with a huge heart. Known as Big Koala or Australian Thor, Callum was 6'3", 250 pounds, and was almost 33 years old. As a large man who played lacrosse professionally, many feared him on the field, which is kind of funny because he was also a kind, thoughtful and sensitive man who greatly enjoyed other people's company. Callum was extraordinarily smart too. Not only was he a great player, but he was also a naturally bright chemist who apparently completed his degree in only 3 years instead of 4. He moved from Perth, Australia to Maryland, where he studied at Stevenson University, and while here he started playing for the Mustangs before going on to play in the Australian Championships and then even play for the Chesapeake Bayhawks. Callum was also a huge fan of the water and would spend many of his weekends surfing or simply on the beach. He was all about the good, active lifestyle filled with sun, sand, and working out. And as seen on his Instagram, his motto was, "If you're not living on the edge, you're taking up too much room." Sadly, this story would feed into that motto.
My name's Callum Robinson. I'm a junior at Stevenson University and I play defense. Welcome to my room.
Robinson, a defender out of Stevenson, 6'4", 248. They call him the Big Koala. He plays long pole, he plays close, and he will draw the Paul Rabel assignment.
Through the many pictures you can find online, you can see that Callum absolutely loved his family and his friends, with pictures of him and his dad on the beach, him and his teammates on the field, and him suited up with the lads. But Callum did have his own challenges too. As someone with type 1 diabetes, he needed to regulate his insulin levels and keep an eye on his blood sugar readings. Saying that, it seemed that he had no problem regulating himself, being the health-conscious athlete that he already was. Now, Callum was not the only Robinson to make his way over to America. In fact, earlier this year, his brother Jake travelled to America to spend time with him. Jake was a couple years younger than Callum. Still living in Australia, he travelled over to the United States to experience a trip of a lifetime with his brother, before then starting his own career as a doctor in an Australian hospital. In his earlier years, he studied at Notre Dame University, which, as we all know, is in France, before then eventually taking adventurous trips to places like Nepal, where he worked on global health projects with Nepalese students. As his mother described in an interview, he was a happy, gentle and compassionate soul pursuing a career in medicine. And it's also clear through many pictures that he loved surfing just as much as his brother. He also loved Fruit Loops, which, by the way, is hands down one of the best cereals known to humankind, and I don't care what you say. Anyway, after graduating, he worked at several regional hospitals across Australia and was a well-respected and liked employee at South Metropolitan Health Service. Moving on to our third person, Callum and Jake were friends with another guy named Jack Carter Rhoad. Better known as Carter, he was born in Atlanta and grew up in San Diego. And after graduating from Northview High in Georgia, he then attended Florida Southern College, where he earned a degree in business management. After that, he then transferred to Point Loma Nazarene University in San Diego, where he also played soccer and was one of the team's best captains. After college, he moved to Guatemala to play soccer professionally. And when he returned to the United States, he then settled in San Diego, where he spent the next decade with friends. After establishing himself a successful career in recruiting, Carter continued to volunteer regularly with Young Life. In addition to this, he would also return as a volunteer coach for the PLNU men's soccer team. Now, it's quite obvious here, but Carter loved to play football, and he was quite the player too. Named Defensive Player of the Year, he allowed only 1.2 goals per game as a junior and a senior. He loved traveling around America, was a big fan of nature, and was well known to be funny. In addition to this, he also enjoyed snowboarding, bowling, and, the big connection here, wakeboarding and surfing. To wrap things up here, Carter was a religious man who loved Chick-fil-A, and had a prosperous and healthy life ahead of him, as long as he limited himself to his favourite food. Now, I know I say this in many of my videos, but Jake, Callum and Carter were, quite honestly, extraordinarily special people, and their parents should be very proud of the men that they raised. By April of 2024, Callum had set his sights on his 33rd birthday, which, by the way, is why his younger brother Jake joined him in America. As a surfer, he wanted to find the perfect place to surf with his brother and his friend, and what's more, he was not afraid to cross the Mexican border to find it. However, before that happened, he would have one fateful encounter. It was on a random afternoon of April 2024 that Callum bumped into an unfamiliar face, and little did either of them know at the time that this meeting would seal his fate forever. Wanting to catch a few waves and have several photos taken on the water, Callum got speaking to a worker at a photography booth near Ocean Beach. The man, named Randy, was a proud photographer who loved surfing and getting to know local people. The two began chatting, and after recognizing good chemistry between the two, Callum invited Randy over to his home to drop off the pictures and have a couple of beers after. It was at this moment that Callum brought up his plans to do something spectacular for his birthday. And with his brother also in town, he wanted to do something special. So when Callum asked him for any special or well-known surf spots, he knew exactly where to go. It is no secret that popular tourist destinations are known to be crowded, expensive, and very exploitative. For example, pushing yourself a few streets away from the main path can open you up to authentic and delicious local foods. There is one big caveat here. You have to make sure that the place you're going is safe. Now, Randy's advice would not perfectly reflect this. As a child, teenager, and then eventually an adult, he had spent many weekends going to a secluded beach named La Bacana with his grandfather. The beach, located in Baja, is a long stretch of coastline that remains unspoiled by locals and tourists alike. And even better, it is a great place to surf and camp. Found just south of Tijuana and Ensenada, it is a short drive from the border. In order to get there, you must travel down Highway 1 before then leaving at Ejido El Ajusco, where you then travel west through the valley, and 17 miles later, you will reach Bocana de Santo Tomas. Now, Randy had been there many times before, over 50 times in fact. Not only that, but he would often go there and camp with his friends, family, and even alone, and never had any trouble. And so, after this meeting, Callum thanked Randy for his advice. In fact, he even offered him to join him, his brother, and his friend in the coming weeks. And Randy, well, he couldn't pass up their offer, and so he planned to join the boys and their adventures whenever that may happen. However, unfortunately, a conflict in his schedule was realized only a few days before the trip, and so Randy had to cancel and back out of the holiday. Now, Callum, Jake, and Carter were all very understanding people, and so they had no problems in him backing out of their plans. Besides, they were all very capable men, and they could easily find the beach by themselves. And so, with that said, Randy drew them a map of the beach and how to get there, just in case, highlighting the dirt road that they had to leave off Highway 1 to get to their destination. The two Australians and single American travelled across the border into Mexico, searching for sun, sand, and of course, surf. On April the 26th, 2024, they found themselves on their first beach of the holiday, taking a grey Lexus and a white Chevrolet to get there. You can see that they then eventually hit Surf Point at Rosarito Beach in Baja. The following day, by April the 27th, they found themselves in Ensenada. In this photo, you can see them kicking their feet up with a beer during an overcast afternoon. Carter could then be seen with an old tape player, goofing around with his two Australian brothers. It seems that later that day, the weather seemed to clear up, and all three could be seen chilling in a hot tub. After that, they then travelled west of Ensenada to a well-known beach named Playa San Miguel. During this time, they sat around, drank coffee, and shared in conversation. Finally, Callum posted one more photo on Instagram after this, poetically sharing a photo of flowers in front of the crashing waves behind. The boys seemed to be off to a great holiday together. However, after this photo, Callum's Instagram stories suddenly stopped. In fact, so did all of his social media, as did the other two. What's more, all three men suddenly stopped responding to text messages and phone calls, and so it didn't take long for their loved ones to become worried. With Callum having type 1 diabetes, he was always against the clock to keep his body well regulated, and so if something were to happen to him or he were lost, for example, he was automatically in danger. In addition to this, and as we already know, they were also due to book into an Airbnb in Rosarito, and so when the owners realized that they had failed to show up, they noticed that something was wrong. On May the 1st, which is 2 days after they had disappeared, Callum's and Jake's mother reached out to the public on Facebook begging for help. Facebook and other media outlets lit up as the news spread across the world, and Mexican WhatsApp groups were filled with speculation.
Media outlets in Mexico are reporting a woman has been arrested in connection with the disappearance of 2 Australian brothers who vanished while on a surfing trip in the country. Mexico police have deployed drones, stepping up efforts to find Callum and Jake Robinson, who haven't been heard from for 5 days.
From surfing the coast of Mexico to now a desperate search, Perth brothers Callum and Jake Robinson were travelling in the Baja, California region alongside their American friend Jack Carter Rhoad in a Chevy Colorado ute destined for the lighthouse at Punta San Jose. But the trio, all in their 30s, haven't been seen or contacted their family since Saturday and didn't show up to an Airbnb they'd booked in Rosarito on Sunday.
Look, this is obviously must be very worrying for the families involved.
Local media outlets are reporting that a search is underway.
Jake and Callum Robinson.
That is when officers learned that the group had plans to make their way to La Bocana. And as soon as police arrived at their last known campsite, it was clear that something had gone violently wrong. Officers noted bloodstains and marks that appeared as if heavy objects had been dragged, leading them to believe that an attack of some kind had occurred at this campsite. And sadly, all clues left behind would continue to describe a grave scene. Tents, which were later identified to match the description of Callum's and Carter's tents, were found burnt at the scene. And although there was no sight of their pickup truck, that too would eventually be found. 4 miles away, in a remote area north of Bocana, they found a burnt white pickup truck, which, as we know, is the one that belonged to Callum Robinson. With this information, and in a desperate bid to calm international attention, the Mexican authorities conducted an extensive search of the area. And sadly, this is where our nightmare peaked. Only a few miles away, and at an extremely hard-to-reach site, officers found a 4-meter deep well, and after peering inside, they found the bodies of Callum, Jake, and Carter. The 3 men had been murdered close to the secluded beach they were so keen to surf at, and it was learned that all 3 of them had suffered a gunshot wound to the head. Now, friends and family were faced with the unbearable task of mourning their loved ones, and Callum's and Jake's parents had to grieve for not one, but both of their sons.
It is with heavy hearts that we share the news that Callum and Jake have been murdered. Our hearts are broken, and the world has become a darker place for us. We also mourn the loss of Carter Rhoad, a close friend. They were young men enjoying their passion of surfing together. We would also send a message to our family and friends, Jake's and Callum's friends, and all the people that have reached out to us. We have been overwhelmed with the outpouring of emotions and support that we have received for Callum and Jake. We know that they were truly loved and impacted many people's lives. Now it's time to bring them home to family and friends and the ocean waves in Australia. Please, live bigger, shine brighter, and love harder in their memory. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Later that week, many surfers honoured the murdered men by forming a circle on their boards in the ocean and throwing flowers into the water. Surprisingly, officers would also find a 4th body beneath the 3 men, but this 4th body was not connected to the story and had been there for far longer. What it did tell the officers is that it became evident that whoever was responsible for their deaths had a clear murder action plan. The well was remarkably well hidden and, furthermore, had been boarded up before being covered in dirt. It was determined that they had likely been murdered by Mexican locals who may or may not have known that Callum, Jake, and Carter were Western. Shortly after investigating the crime scene, officers arrested 3 people they believed were responsible for their deaths. The 3 suspects were named as the alleged ringleader, Jesus Gerardo, his brother, Christian Alejandro, and Gerardo's 23-year-old girlfriend, Ari Giselle. Jesus Gerardo goes by the alias El Quecas, which is a slang word for quesadillas or cheese tortillas. Apparently, he has a long rap sheet which includes a history of drug dealing, domestic violence, and vehicle theft. Mexican authorities believe that the perpetrators saw Callum's Chevrolet Colorado and wanted to steal the expensive tires for themselves. Knowing the severity of the situation, many victims put their hands up and allow themselves to be robbed. However, it appears that Callum, Jake, and Carter resisted instead, and sadly, that is when things escalated to violence. Ari Giselle was stopped by cops on a routine patrol in Ensenada on May 1st, 2024, where she then allegedly threw a small bag containing 100 grams of methamphetamine on the ground before trying to flee. It was reported that Ari had come to the attention of the authorities after she had turned on Carter's iPhone, which then pinged a local mobile phone tower. A Baja investigator said they had contacted US authorities in San Diego to obtain the victim's phone number, of which it was then watched with a careful eye until one of them was turned on, and that is when Ari came into sight. Ari told the court that Gerardo had admitted to killing all 3 men after he returned home from the campsite where they were last seen alive on April 27th. He told her, "I essentially fucked up 3 gringos. I killed them." He then showed her his vehicle, which by now was equipped with the tires stolen from the Chevrolet. And so, with all said and done, it looks like Gerardo is in very hot water here. And next, the Attorney General's office is now tasked with proving that Ari was in possession of methamphetamine with the intention of selling the illegal drug. Meanwhile, Gerardo will remain in custody until his next hearing later this year in November 2024. The presence of an unconnected 4th body in the well has led many to believe, or at least speculate, if maybe Mexico's notorious cartel were involved. Investigators claim that this bears the hallmarks of an organized crime, and that, furthermore, petty crimes like stealing tires aren't usually resolved with more violent crimes. Now, as you may or may not know, Baja California has been plagued by cartel violence in the recent months and even years, and the authorities are really struggling to regain control. Similarly, in the year 2015, 2 Australian surfers named Adam Coleman and Dean Lucas were murdered in western Sinaloa state, which is found only across the Gulf of California from the Baja Peninsula. So, unfortunately, these sorts of crimes do occur relatively often in the area. What precisely will happen to Ari, Christian, and Jesus is still not known, but with them now arrested and in police custody, it is not looking good for them. Because, by the way, the Mexican system is rather swift and brutal. Now, it is worth noting here that both men are likely to be found guilty, especially considering the confidence that authorities have with the evidence they've found. Anyway, as always, I'll let you know exactly what happens when I know. As a lot of us know, disappearances and even murders are not uncommon in this part of the world, where, unfortunately, drug cartels hold a terrifying amount of power and show little regard for human life. And in their haste to close this case, Mexican authorities have left a lot of questions unanswered. Of course, many of these are hopefully going to be resolved as we go through legal proceedings. The area's proximity to the American border makes it a target for both official and black market economies, the location enticing not only foreign tourists, but also significant drug and human traffickers. According to the US State Department, Baja California falls under the 2nd highest severity level, urging travelers to reconsider traveling due to crime and kidnapping which often occurs in the area. To paint a clearer picture here, the Mexican government estimates that more than 110,000 people have disappeared since records began in the year 1962. However, local groups insist that this number is actually far, far higher. As Mexico strives for economic development, it faces the difficult task of quashing crime in an evil industry that, unfortunately, undeniably helps bring in money to the local economy. It is a very complex and controversial balance, and sadly, tens of thousands of lives are lost in the process, not only through addiction, but murder too. Callum's girlfriend, Emily Horwath, said, "My heart is shattered into a million pieces. You are one of one. I will love you forever." It is evident through the Instagram tribute that she has left behind how phenomenally cheery, upbeat, and happy Callum was, not just around her, but to everyone he met. As the younger brother, Jake often takes a quieter role in this tragic story, but he too has an equally impressive heart and personality. An avid traveller and aspiring doctor, he planned to take a position working at a hospital in Geelong, southwest of Melbourne. And as a man who wanted to heal, support and save other people's lives, it is beyond tragic that he instead lost his at the hands of evil, greedy men. Carter was a family man who devoted his time to regularly visiting his parents. He had recently become engaged to his partner Natalie and had grand plans for his future. And it's a tragedy that he too was forced to leave so much goodness behind. I hope that the families of these men find comfort and closure down their long road to recovery. And unfortunately, that's pretty much where the case ends today, folks. I think I've pretty much covered everything that we know so far. As always, more information will come out as the trials proceed and more things are released to the public. It is worth saying that you should always follow government guidelines on where and when not to travel. Unfortunately, these guys were rather unlucky, but it is known that this area of Mexico is extraordinarily dangerous. On that note, I'd love to know what you think about this case. Personally, it is so devastating to see 3 extraordinarily special men murdered for basically no reason at all. Right, with the end of the video and on a more personal note, I wanted to share a few things that have been going on in my life and the current intermediate future with the channel. You may have noticed that my schedule has recently slowed down a little bit, and that'll continue throughout the month of June. It's hard to tell you how much I work exactly, but honestly my brain never stops thinking about YouTube, and I'd say that I probably work around 10 or 11 hours a day. And although it looks like all I do is post videos, you have to think about everything that goes behind them. Things like trying to find a case and then research it, script writing, recording, editing, reviewing, and then uploading to YouTube, and all the rest like trying to keep up with comments, social media, and then everything else. Honestly, it's quite bewildering at times. And the Coffeehouse crime team is extraordinarily small. So I'm not going anywhere, but I am going down to possibly just 1 a week for the rest of the month, and then after that I'll try and dial it up a little bit. All I can say is that if you feel like you're battling burnout, please slow down, because, at least from my perspective, you will never know until it's too late. Anyway folks, I think that's pretty much it today. Sorry for the rant, but I just wanted to let you know where I am. And as always, I really do appreciate you being here. Quite honestly, this community is absolutely amazing. And also, we reached 2 million subscribers. Honestly, I can't believe that. I never thought I'd reach 1 million, so this is just an absolutely extraordinary milestone. Of course, it happened at maybe the wrong time with me and my burnout, but either way, I am absolutely thrilled. Thank you so much, folks. I think that's pretty much it. I can't think of anything else to say right now, but yeah, I love what I do. I love this process. Just sometimes you need to slow down a little bit to enjoy the finer things in life. On that note, I'll see you again very soon for another video. If you'd like to support me, check out my Patreon here, or alternatively, check me out on social media here. Anyway, catch you again very soon, folks, and as always, look after yourselves, look after each other, and of course, stay safe. Thank you, and goodbye.